Good evening, everyone, and welcome to March's Cadet Careers Talk. I'm Millie, and I'm the cadet host. You should be able to see on screen a slide with a link on it. If you would like to submit any questions throughout the talk, use the link, and we will hopefully put your questions to Ashley at the end of the session. You may want to write it down because it will disappear in the talk, so it's a good idea to either write it down or have it open in a tab so you can use it. So I'm going to welcome Ashley, who is our interviewee. I don't know if that's the right term.
Interviewee. Let's go for that.
Interviewee for the night. So yeah, Ashley is going to be telling us all about his career and a bit about how he started in St John as a cadet. So hopefully we'll all get some exciting stories. And we'll learn a bit more about his role as a consultant paramedic, which I'm really looking forward to because it sounds very exciting. So remember to send in any questions you have. I'm going to start with my first question. So, what made you first decide to join St John as a cadet?
Awesome. Well, so hello everyone. I'm Ash, one of the consultant paramedics and previous St John ambulance member as both a cadet and adult. So why did I join St John? Good question. Because it seemed like a natural thing to do. Since I was probably 5, that was probably my earliest memory of choosing sort of a career in healthcare. I sort of just wanted to get involved. I didn't know what was available, didn't know about sort of badges or anything like that. But cadets, I sort of went to events sort of as a child, being dragged along by your parents, very embarrassing, to fetes and stuff like that, and got to see St John Ambulance there. And I sort of saw an ambulance, I saw blue lights, I saw people dressed in a uniform, then I saw young people, and then I saw young people that were similar to my age, and so I got speaking to my parents and explored St John Ambulance as a cadet, and I had to wait about 6 months before I hit the age where I could join, and I remember joining Caterham St John Ambulance, which is in it's not Cambridgeshire at all, in Surrey. So that was my first adventure. Managed to go with a couple of school friends, and we all enjoyed a long career with St John. In fact, 2 of my school friends are still in St John Ambulance. Way back in 1995. Who would have thought? Horrible jumpers then.
Oh, you see, you mentioned Cambridge. Now that's my district. You know, I'm an East cadet, so. I mean, I know you said that obviously you already had an idea to be in healthcare as a career. Do you think St John made you further consider that, or do you think you already had your mind set on it before you joined St John?
Yes, so I think I absolutely had my mind set on it before joining St John Ambulance. However, joining St John Ambulance, there were some quite key and inspirational people. So I reflect back to one of the adults at my unit, Ben Clark, who was this kind of cool guy. He was sort of early adult, say 18, 19, 20, and then he joined the ambulance service. And then all of a sudden, I was a cadet on duty with somebody who joined the ambulance service. I had someone I could tap into. I had somebody I could ask questions about. What's their training like? How do they feel? What's the job really like? And it was absolutely phenomenal. And then actually, I ended up doing work experience with what was Surrey Ambulance Service then. And I went out with Ben Clark on PTS. He then went to do his ambulance technician training, and now I get to see him from time to time because he's one of the critical care air ambulance paramedics with Air Ambulance KSS. So it's really kind of cool that you start to build a network of people that do the career that you aspire to do, but people who you have a commonality, is that a word? I don't know, I'm going to make up a word, a similarity with, and a common interest with. So you've got that natural bond, and therefore those potential barriers to communication are sort of alleviated a little bit, because I'm in St John, I've got my identity of being in St John, and I'm talking to somebody else who's kind of cool at doing the job that I want to do, also in St John, and we're on an event together, so I've got a captive audience, and once I start talking, you can't shut me up. So St John for me definitely gave greater insight into some of the career choices that I have gone on to make, yeah, that's kind of cool.
I mean, I think all of the cadets would agree with me. There is always that one core adult in the unit. So if you had to describe your role as a consultant paramedic to like an alien, how would you describe it?
So I guess it depends on the alien that I was speaking to, and their language and dialect and all that kind of stuff. You will have realised that I'm quite an energetic person, use my hands to aid in communication. But in relative seriousness, I would describe my role as a senior healthcare leader, somebody who has sort of the opportunity to positively impact both the profession and the organisation that I work for. And certainly within the organisation that I am employed within, so South East Coast Ambulance Service, I'm seen as the head of profession, or one of the head of professions. We're very fortunate to have 4 consultant paramedics here. So yes, that's probably how I'd describe it. If the alien was then to go, can you describe it in another way? I could then talk about skills for health. So anybody who's interested in a healthcare career, do a bit of Googling, have a look at skills for health, and it'll describe different levels of clinician across the full spectrum of allied health professions or nursing or medicine actually, and we'll describe different levels, and it sort of goes up to level 9. So a level 9 might be like a director or sort of somebody who's quite influential in the service. A level 8 skills for health practitioner is a consultant level clinician, and that's frequently described as sort of an expert practicing clinician with a senior leadership role and an sort of opportunity to change and develop systems. So yes, and then if the alien still wants to know what I actually did, because I'm full of buzzwords, then I might just say something along the lines of, in my day-to-day job as the consultant paramedic at South East Coast Ambulance Service, I am a practicing critical care paramedic. I am the head of service, head of department for clinical education and training, responsible for all educational activity for any clinician spanning the South East region. And have the opportunity to work alongside and influence higher education programs, other apprenticeship programs that are not sort of paramedic programs in sort of themselves, but also contribute towards national guidance writing, sort of being a writer for JRCALP, so the clinical practice guidelines that are used by the UK ambulance services, or getting involved in organisations such as the Faculty of Pre-Hospital Care of the Royal College of Surgeons, where I'm involved in writing or rewriting the pre-hospital emergency medicine curriculum, which is kind of cool, having a paramedic getting involved in writing a curriculum for doctors' subspecialties. So yeah, that's how I describe my job in a very verbose way as a consultant paramedic to an alien.
That sounds really cool.
It kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, see, did you always want to be a paramedic, or did you have other healthcare ideas?
Good question. So bearing in mind, so since the age of 5, that's the first reference my parents have told me about my career aspirations. It was about ambulance services, seeing the white van with the blue light on the roof, driving quite fast. Then grew up a little bit and realised the different roles that existed for ambulance personnel. And let's not forget, back then, paramedics weren't really a thing, or they were just starting to be a thing. They certainly weren't registered as healthcare professionals. So there was a lot of variance across the nation. So as a child growing up and as a sort of progressing towards adulthood, I knew quite firmly what I wanted to be. And let's be honest about it, every now and then you revert back to the 5-year-old self where there's blue lights and lots of activity and action. But fundamentally, it's now about being that registered healthcare professional. And I think when in my role at the moment, I work closely with the wider healthcare systems, with other allied healthcare professionals, AHPs, and I have an opportunity to have insight into the roles and scopes of other healthcare professionals, and I genuinely think that the paramedic profession is uber cool because you have a very vast autonomous scope of practice. You're going out and seeing and caring for an undifferentiated caseload of patients from birth to grave, medical to trauma, and you get to do that, and you are incredibly autonomous. So I think it's something that the more I grew to learn about the paramedic profession, the more hungry I was to be a part of it. But also growing up, I mean, I applied for medical school, didn't get in, didn't get the ACAS points, UCAS points, whatever it's called, so didn't get into med school, was offered a sort of a scholarship, I suppose, at University of Hertfordshire in collaboration with what was East Anglian Ambulance Service, what is now East of England Ambulance Service, and then spent 17 years working in the East of England Ambulance Service, having had that opportunity through a scholarship. And like most children, I went through a phase where I either wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer, so I dabbled in that too as a special constable in sort of 2009 through to 2013, which actually really complemented my understanding of society, and developed some other skills that I've absolutely taken from doing police work as a special constable into my professional practice as a paramedic.
See, I know you mentioned how many different roles there are. I mean, in unit, we're doing the ambulance awareness ground para subject, and we were looking at all the different roles, and there's just so many. There's like such a variety of roles in just one sort of aspect of healthcare.
Yeah, completely agree. I almost think we've overcomplicated it though. So within my organisation, so South East Coast Ambulance, we're looking to streamline that a little bit and use common language that our patients and the demographic that we serve understand. So most people have probably watched Casualty. So my mum understands technician, she understands paramedic, gets a little bit confused at emergency care support worker, and then all the other terms that get used interchangeably. And from a patient safety point of view, and from and in particular a human factors point of view, there's a lot to be said for simplifying the language and probably clumping a couple of those roles together and just using one term that covers 2 or 3 other little sub roles. So
obviously there's so many jobs, so how does the role of like your normal paramedic vary from your role as a consultant paramedic?
Good question. So I actually, and others may disagree, so one of the joys of being a consultant paramedic or a really experienced clinician is you never get a black and white answer, and there's lots of different opinions. So my opinion is, from a clinical point of view, very little is different. So a job in paramedic, I am a job in paramedic. I'm on a 72-hour period of on-call, but this week I've seen 6 patients as a senior manager, just responding in my car, going out and seeing some patients, which is kind of cool. I love it. But what I do for patients is the same as what a paramedic does. It's important to recognise that your job in paramedic has the opportunity to potentially specialise, and you can specialise in a number of domains, whether that be urgent care, critical care, education. I've got a bit greedy. I've specialised in critical care and education. But then the differentiation between a consultant level practitioner and sort of a skills for health level 6 practitioner, somebody who's doing the job day in, day out, or maybe a skills for health level 7, which is more of a specialist, is really the sort of four advancing pillars or four pillars of consultant level practice. So the main difference is the expectation to be an expert clinician. So it's not just about the clinical care provided, but being able to provide expertise, consultation upon clinical care that's provided by other people. So as an example, I was the duty consultant for our serious incident group, where we review cases that may not have gone as well as we would have liked as an organisation, and then we can sort of embark upon investigatory processes to understand what went wrong and what we can do to learn to improve for the future. And consultants are utilised for their expertise in clinical practice to provide that expert opinion and help improve. Another key pillar being around sort of leadership and service redesign and sort of developing systems. That is a lot of my role. At the moment, I'm doing a complete review upon the educational pathways that we have and how we describe and how we provide a career progression route from somebody joining off the streets through to becoming a consultant paramedic potentially, and how people can see their career path. So that's certainly a key sort of role for me. You've then got sort of the domain around scholarly activities, so sort of research, quality improvement, which again is absolutely pivotal. And then not least sort of the learning, developing and educating. So those four key pillars are the fundamental difference between myself as a consultant paramedic and somebody who predominantly focuses on just being a clinician. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because without clinician, the sort of 3,009 calls that we take on a daily basis within South East Coast Ambulance Service wouldn't get a response.
So is there much like further education involved with becoming a consultant paramedic? Is there a lot more courses?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I think what we need to recognise, and what I recognise, is that the paramedic profession is a very junior profession. When you compare us to medicine, the world of doctors, and you compare us to nursing, much more established, both in time and what they're doing, sort of programs of work and study, and so there is a natural route. Whereas when I speak to my consultant colleagues across the nation, actually we've all had a convoluted route to get where we're at. When I reflect upon my career, so I'm now 17, 18 years thereabouts in the ambulance service. I spent 17 years in East of England. Oh no, 18 years, there you go. 17 years in East of England, 1 year here at South East Coast Ambulance Service. And I haven't had a linear path. There isn't a direct path to becoming a consultant paramedic. In those 17 years, I've been engaged in operational leadership. I've been engaged in clinical leadership. I've been engaged in education. I've been engaged in specialist practice, delivering critical care. I've gone out of the ambulance service on a secondment with a bungee cord, because they wanted me back, into commissioning, and spent a year as a commissioner looking after the service redesign team of one of the clinical commissioning groups. I've then got involved in the faculty of pre-hospital care in air ambulances, with the College of Paramedics, with sort of JR Calc, and through gaining those experiences, I've been able to develop a portfolio that enables me to credibly articulate against the four pillars of consultant level practice. Educationally, you do need to go away and do some other education. So MSc in sort of healthcare leadership. I went and did a sort of a PG cert in advanced clinical practice at the University of Cambridge, that aligned to the pre-hospital emergency medicine sort of curriculum. So in short, there's not a linear path. There's a convoluted route, but a route that is possible, and a route that is increasingly being recognised across the ambulance sector, and with an increasing amount of consultant paramedics across the nation, there are people that you can go and talk to just to explore what was the route that they took, and actually what route could you take, which may be different, but could draw upon similarities. But the fundamental premise is You need to develop a portfolio career that makes you credible when you come to describe against those 4 sort of key pillars.
See, I find that really interesting, kind of finding out that there's not just one way to become something, there's just so many different ways. So what makes you enjoy the world of emergency medicine and pre-hospital care so much?
Awesome. Well, you might have guessed that I've got a slightly short attention span. So what I like about pre-hospital emergency medicine is we're delivering pre-hospital care at times in a high-risk, high-tempo operational environment. We're frequently operating with very limited information, and we have to provide our deductive, so almost be a bit of an investigator, and utilise all of our senses, utilise sort of the sort of situational awareness of the operational environment in which you're working, people's homes, what medicines they're taking, what care support they're getting, so that we can form a holistic view with that very limited information to make good decisions, or the best decisions that you could make at that time with the information that you've got. The bit that drives me is no day is the same. There are hours of boredom, moments of terror, but actually there is always an opportunity to learn. There's always an opportunity to do better. There's always an opportunity to teach and impart your experience and onto other people, not in a it's all about me kind of way, but in a debriefing somebody and providing a different perspective. And by doing that, there is always an opportunity to develop individuals and contribute to developing the profession. When I think back to sort of the start of my career, and the interventions and the approach that we had are different to what we have now. Healthcare moves on so fast, and we've got an opportunity to be a part of that and start to push those sort of changes. And I sort of said a little bit earlier on, not too recently actually, that actually we've got we are a junior profession when compared to other more established healthcare professions. A lot of our clinical practice is based upon literature from medicine, from nursing, and international literature. But actually we're starting now to see increasing examples of paramedic-led research, paramedic-led literature that is informing clinical practice. And how cool is that? Like, proper cool.
It sounds so amazing having such a diverse job. It's not just you go in, you sit at a desk and you do the same thing every day. It's just so different. And I think that's what excites a lot of people, just having such a variety. So what is the most challenging part of your work?
So, yeah, I'm having a bad day today, to be honest. So I think one of the challenges that I experience even, put my teeth in, right now is the fact that my role is incredibly diverse, and there are not enough of us, and we're spread far too thin. We're spinning far too many plates, and actually I'm starting to drop some of those plates or not deliver at the pace that I would like to deliver. And there is a risk that when you become too overwhelmed with the amount of work to achieve, that you become less impactful. So I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges. But then it's the second biggest challenge is being able to take a group of individuals on a journey with you of change, because we sometimes get stuck in a rut. We sometimes end up doing what we've done time after time after time again, and realising that not a lot changes, nothing seems to get better. And actually you do need to take people on that journey to say, well, let's look at quality improvement. Let's look at what we've done for the past however long. Sorry, I'm on call. That's all right. What have we done for however long? And what could we do differently, and what is the impact of that change, and then just continue that cycle and continue that cycle. And you just have to have that drive, that energy, that passion, just to keep on going through those highs and those lows that you experience.
So, I mean, I think we would all agree that COVID-19 has been a massive challenge for everyone in the healthcare sector. So how much has like your role changed over COVID?
Yeah, so I think it's been really quite interesting. So COVID's been around clearly for a couple of years, and when I have moved organisations, I was East England Ambulance Service, and then in the middle of COVID moved, which is a challenge in itself. I've got experience of working in two different organisations, still both two NHS ambulance trusts, and I think as a clinician, your day job changed slightly. So there was a change in the acuity of some of the patients. There was a change in some of the types of emergency calls that were being called for, because actually people were at home more frequently. You wouldn't get the weird and wonderful accidents and all that kind of stuff. People were wearing personal protective equipment. Sort of society were wearing masks constantly. So some of the disease patterns that we see, some of the viral illnesses that would ordinarily occur, seem to change. We didn't necessarily have that seasonal flu at the same level of impact that it normally has. So I think we had to relearn how to respond to the changing needs of our population. We absolutely needed to relearn and modify our approach to personal protective equipment, certainly in the early days. And central government were issuing guidance that changed almost on a daily basis. And one of the biggest challenges for myself and my colleagues working at a sort of a consultant level or a senior operations level or a senior nursing and quality level within the organisation was, how do we respond to these rapid changes in guidance when we're covering 5,500 square miles with a very disparate workforce involving 4,000 clinicians? It's really difficult, and unfortunately an email doesn't cut the mustard, and we need to make sure that we communicate effectively. So that was a real big challenge for us. When I specifically look at education, you've got this dichotomy. We're working at a time, or we were working at a time where we had to limit social engagement and all this kind of stuff, bringing people together, and we had to think about appropriate social distancing and all this kind of jazz. At the same time, we still need to maintain a clinical workforce that have the appropriate knowledge base to fulfil their roles safely, and we still had to embark upon significant recruitment into the ambulance service in a variety of roles, including voluntary roles, in a very different way to augment the service provision, because not only was call volumes up at times, we did see a dip actually, interestingly, but then you see a spike in call volumes and a change in the acuity of the patients, but actually our own staff were becoming ill. How did we look after the psychological safety of our workforce that are seeing a different case mix of patients in the context of a pandemic, selflessly going in to care for patients at a time where things were changing? We didn't know much about COVID-19. They were still scared for themselves, they were scared for their families, and we were asking them to step up and go out and do the amazing job that they do day in, day out for our society. And that did come with a lot of psychological harm. And some of our colleagues contracted COVID. In fact, loads of our colleagues contracted COVID, but sadly, some of our colleagues died. And so we're having to continue working, recognising that we've lost some of our friends, some of our colleagues, some of those inspirational characters, and that takes its toll on all of us. So I think the role changed in that we needed to be responsive to changes, really think about our staff and the impact of what we were asking them to do, but also think about the clinical medicine provided. And now we're in this new challenge whereby it's almost like COVID doesn't exist anymore. It absolutely does exist. Please do continue to social distance appropriately. Please do actually continue to wear masks, by the way. That's my make every contact count thing. But actually all of the legal restrictions have gone, and we've seen a change in the habits of society. We're seeing a change in compliance with personal protective equipment within healthcare. And what we need to do now is we need to go into that recovery phase. COVID-19 has been a major incident. It's been a true major incident for the NHS. And we're now in this recovery phase whereby we need to pick up the stuff that we dropped or changed, and we need to start developing what we do to get back on track. And actually, as healthcare systems, we need to start planning for what this means for our future disease processes. So we know that through COVID, access to healthcare was different. There are individuals that have had chronic health conditions that haven't been as effectively managed as they were previously to the pandemic, and that is going to have a knock-on impact to the quality of their lives moving forward, and that will have an impact on the demands placed upon the healthcare services. So we need to stop behaving like an ambulance service and be a true system partner, look at public health modelling so that we can be responsive to the needs of our population. God, I chat too much.
See, I know on screen we've just put the form link back up, so make sure you ask any questions that you might have for Ashley, and I will try my best to get him to answer as many as possible. So I know previously you said you worked for East of England Air Ambulance. How much has your role in South East Coast changed between the two trusts?
Yeah, so I worked for East of England Ambulance Service, worked here at South East Coast Ambulance Service, worked closely with other neighbouring ambulance services, in particular London, can't help but speak like a London person, or South Central Ambulance Service, because they're my neighbouring trusts. I think my reflections, my absolute honest reflections, and what I say to staff actually who are considering moving and things like that, the grass is not greener on the other side. So the ambulance service is the ambulance service. Some services have ever so slightly different service delivery model, ever so slightly different career structures and stuff like that. So a little bit like being a prospective undergrad student, you're going to look at the degree that you want to do, the program of study that you want to do. You're going to look at the different universities that offer that program of study, and then you're going to go, I fancy that one. So I think the geography between East of England and South East Coast is incredibly similar. It's got urban population, it's got university cities, it's got rural population, it's got coastal town, it's got migrational or seasonal sort of migration for holiday destinations and stuff like that. So actually the demographic is very similar. And by that the population's similar, and the healthcare needs are fairly similar, as are the systems. So I think it's quite similar. But when I compare my organisation, East of England Ambulance Service, with North East, North West, Wales, South West Ambulance Service, they are very different. And then London's different still, because it is just so metropolitan, it's so urban and has a very different demographic. So do your homework is what I would suggest, much like an undergrad degree looking at a higher education institute. Do your homework, look at the environment where you're potentially going to be living, and sort of wonder, do you fit that environment? So I look at the Downs, I'm 15 minutes from the coast, it's great for dog walking.
So with all your experience that you've kind of compiled over your 18 years in different ambulance services, what would the one piece of advice you could give to Cadet U be?
Be ambitious and advocate for yourself. So we are always operating in a challenging environment, in a competitive environment, particularly if like myself, I've got career aspirations. It's a little bit like a triangle. There's loads of people at that level. There's very few people at that level, and so by maintaining that ambition, that sheer tenaciousness, that passion, that very clear passion, and that desire to go away and learn, you're going to make yourself a much more attractive candidate for career progression, so on and so forth. By advocating for yourself, what I mean by that is, don't be shy. Go and speak to your role models, identify role models, find people that go, you know what, I can relate to you, and I would like to talk to you actually, because you might have a nugget of information that's going to be really impactful to me. And I reflect upon a conversation I had earlier with one of my executive directors, and basically they've offered me a little bit of coaching, and that's so impactful to me. Because they get to observe me in the operational, in the workplace, and then provide those, not this is how to improve yourself, Ash, but provide those coaching conversations that throw an observation in and getting you to reflect and do that journey of self-discovery, but in a safe way. So have that passion, have that drive, and advocate for yourself, and by that find those role models. Speak. Don't be scared of speaking up and just asking questions, because actually people are approachable and they want to help.
I think that's such good advice. I mean, in your time as a cadet, what would your one standout moment be?
Ooh, standout moment. I'm gonna say two as a cadet. And then I'm going to say one as an adult, because I'm allowed to do that, because you're talking to me and I get to talk. So the two standout moments for me as a cadet were sort of a residential course that was my sort of cadet educator program. Actually, I learnt a lot there, and for me that set me on a path for education, and I thoroughly enjoyed imparting information, knowledge to fellow cadets, but in a structured way, and I learned how to develop that structured way in those instructional methods, and then you started to see the impact that had, and for me that sowed the seed that I wanted to be a paramedic, but I wanted to be a paramedic that did some stuff in education, and I've been able to do that, and I continue to do that now. The second standout cadet memory, was having the opportunity to go and meet Princess Anne of Buckingham Palace. Had a whale of a time, and just as a kid, going to Buckingham Palace was pretty cool. So that was standout. And then as an adult, because I've said I'm allowed an adult option, was to continue to be a child in effect. So when I became an adult in St John, it wasn't about necessarily going out and doing events and doing the adult stuff. In fact, I was rubbish at doing the adult stuff. What I did is come and joined sort of a colleague that I studied with, sort of Anne Kitchener, in Cambridgeshire through university, and then got involved in the cadet unit that Ant was running at the time, and then got involved in sort of cadet, in youth staff officer type role for Cambridgeshire, and that was truly phenomenal, because it gave me an opportunity to play a part, a very small part, in providing an opportunity for other cadets. So yeah, when you become an adult, don't forget about cadets, because there's definitely a lot you can continue to do to inspire sort of youth, and then just watch the cadets grow, which is amazing.
So I think the final question from me tonight is going to be, if you had to sum up your role in 3 words, what would they be?
Okay, so I'm going to say challenging, because it's kind of difficult spinning all those plates and trying to be impactful. So challenging, it is rewarding, sometimes frustrating, but it's predominantly rewarding. And it's impactful. So I get to see the benefits of my endeavours, and that sounds slightly arrogant, it sounds slightly big-headed, but it is quite true. I get to see positive interactions, I get to see learners qualify and become paramedics. I then get to promote them into jobs and all that kind of stuff, which is a really cool thing. So challenging, rewarding and impactful is how I'd sum up my role.
So we have some questions from the cadets on this call. So obviously first I want to say a shout out to all the cadets who have joined on their meeting night. So we have cadets from Tame in Oxfordshire, Whitehaven cadets from Cumbria, and we think we also may have cadets from Cobham and, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Oxshott? I don't know. I'm not very good at pronouncing names of places. So our first question is, can you tell us what subjects are good to study in sixth form and what kind of grades you think we should try to aspire to get?
Cool. Well, first of all, grades, always aspire for the best you can do, because actually, if you do the best that you can do, you're going to reach your potential, whatever that potential is, and that's really important. If you don't quite get the grades, I didn't get the grades at A-levels, certainly not for the med school because they didn't let me in, but that's a good thing for me. Yeah, look at that. And actually, if you want to go into sort of university and do that undergraduate route to become a paramedic, then or any healthcare sort of profession, then look at the universities and explore what grades that they want and what access requirements are, and then tailor your options to that. So I'm really fortunate. I knew what I wanted to do fairly early on, and yeah, so actually I stuck to a bit of maths, human biology and chemistry. Did a bit of office applications as well, which is quite handy for me now because I'm a touch typist, nice and quick. Yeah, so you're definitely going to need some sciences. You're definitely going to need maths for a healthcare role. But do look at what the HEIs, the higher education institutes that you want to go to, are exploring. Equally recognise that you don't just have to go to university. So there are apprenticeship routes now where you can join and become a sort of an apprentice associate ambulance practitioner or an emergency care support worker within the ambulance service, and then can go on to sort of an apprenticeship, level 6 degree apprenticeship. I've said apprenticeship far too many times there, I do apologise, but you can go on to a level 6 degree apprenticeship, which pretty much all the 10 UK ambulance services are now doing, 8 of which through University of Cumbria. And the access requirements are really GCSEs with English and maths at C or above, or whatever the new levels are, because they've moved to numbers. Old school, sorry, or functional skills level 2. So that's the access requirements, and that's a viable alternative option rather than going to do an undergrad degree. To gain HCPC paramedic registration, though, you need to be on an approved programme of study by the HCPC, and it's got a degree level sort of entry. So you're going to have to do degree level, whatever happens.
So if you did decide to go to university, what sort of universities do you recommend for studying paramedicine, and what sort of apprenticeships are good? Which I think is a great question from our cadet in Tame.
Yeah, great reputation. So not reputation question. What I alluded to earlier, you ask any registrant, particularly anyone who's gone to university, and they'll give a shout out to the university they went to. So I'm going to say Hertfordshire all the way. Hertfordshire for me was very good. But I think what you need to recognise when you embark upon a programme of study is, particularly with paramedic sciences, every single HEI programme has had to meet the requirements set by the Health and Care Professions Council, the HCPC, and they have standards of education training set, which is the framework that they apply to the HEIs that offer programmes of study. So actually any of them meet a defined standard. What you need to do is recognise that you're going to be learning at that university for 3 years. You need to probably have a little bit of insight into yourself about what you like and what you dislike and how you like to learn. And you need to recognise that the universities are businesses, and actually you're the customer. So you can go and ask them the challenging questions. You can explore their perspectives. You can speak to their teams and make sure that university is the university for you, because it will be different. So some individuals will like the thoughts of sort of big university towns, sort of cities and all this kind of stuff. Others may not like that, and would not necessarily feel warm towards that kind of environment. So it has to be a personal choice. I'm bigging up Hertfordshire because that's where I studied, but we'll go from there. In relation to degree apprenticeships. Degree apprenticeships in the ambulance service are fairly new. So there was a national tendering process 3 years ago, and then they've started in the past 18 months or something like that. So there aren't that many providers doing the degree apprenticeships. The degree apprenticeships are all alongside employing ambulance trusts. So actually you don't really get much choice. So if you come to CCAM, then on the apprenticeship route, you will do a future quals apprenticeship, associate ambulance practitioner, and then you will go and do a level 6 degree apprenticeship with the University of Cumbria. Other ambulance services have gone for other providers. So unfortunately with the apprenticeships you go where your employer sends you.
So we've had a really good question about, can cadets get work experience with paramedics and all the other roles in the ambulance service? If not, how else would you recommend getting that practical experience?
Absolutely. So good question. It's a question that we get quite a lot. So it will depend upon the institution, and I know that with the advent of T-levels, everything's changing in education, but with the advent of T-levels and stuff like that, there have been discussions across healthcare systems around how can you put individuals on work experience placements and stuff like that safely, and we need to recognise the operational environment in which we work, and one could definitely argue going and doing work experience in a hospital acute trust provides an opportunity for safety, because actually you can say no, we'll hold back on this particular case and pick the environment in which someone works. The challenge with pre-hospital emergency medicine or pre-hospital care is we don't have that privilege. You're on an ambulance or a van. I can call it a van. You're on an ambulance or a car. You don't have a say to what you're going into. You don't. It could be an unsafe environment. It could be a very exposed environment. You could be exposed to psychological harm, and there's very little we can do to protect you from that. So, and for that reason, all ambulance services will not let under 18s come out on the front line. Those ambulance services that have non-emergency patient transport service contracts might offer an opportunity for work experience. Within my organisation, we are exploring the opportunity of work experience, but that would be in corporate services like clinical audit or something like that. But even then, we have to think about what you have access to from a GDPR type point of view. Control room environment, but again, it can be a little bit unpredictable, and you can be exposed to psychological harm. But also training school, we can bring people into a training school. You can get involved actually in training. How can you go and get experience outside of work experience? Well, I'm going to use training as a great example. So there are a number of UK air ambulance services across the country that do courses all the time. We have university programs are running courses, and my education department run programs, and so there might be an opportunity to come in and observe and take part in those, just to get a little bit of exposure. Let's not forget that St John Ambulance is doing pre-hospital care, and I think that we sometimes forget that. You are seeing patients in the pre-hospital arena. You are seeing patients who are undifferentiated, so you are getting an abundance of experience. When I think about applying to university and educational programs, what you need to do is think about how to make yourself attractive, and being somebody that employs individuals into the organisation and gets involved in university recruitment and selection. I look at the type of candidates that I would want to appoint. So I want to appoint people that clearly are passionate, have that drive, have that sparkle in their eye. But actually, I want to appoint people that have a degree of self-confidence, the ability to communicate in an open and engaging way. Because if you've got those things, I can teach you anything. I can teach you the psychomotor skills and some of the more challenging clinical medical stuff. Sometimes we'll get candidates who apply to us, both as an ambulance service or to HEIs, that actually don't have much life experience. It's not about life experience, but it's about the ability to communicate. It's about the ability to connect. So doing work experience in a sort of customer service kind of environment is actually quite useful because you can develop those non-technical skills that are going to make the difference between you as a clinician and then you as an uber cool clinician. So yeah, I would explore the other stuff. It's not about the technical skills and going out and seeing medical emergencies. It's about those non-technical skills that are relatable. And if you think back to what I said, I mean, I went and became a special constable. I took a lot of skills from the policing type arena back into my paramedic practice. And a lot of that was de-escalation strategies and stuff. Clearly don't have a pattern.
So how does your work as a cadet link with the transferable skills that you kind of mentioned in your role in the police to being a paramedic and like those different skills?
So it's absolutely the non-technical skills. It's not the knowledge base of being a paramedic, because we teach that and then you consolidate that through gaining experiential learning and debriefing and other programs of study. So I look at the majority of what I do as a paramedic is go in with my eyes wide open to be able to assimilate information, whether that be the environment, whether that be talking to vulnerable people, whether that be talking to children and changing my communication strategy and approach. So thinking about those non-technical skills, thinking about your demeanour, how you are perceived by other people and how you perceive other people and how you modify your attitudes and behaviours are the things that you can absolutely pick up on as a cadet in your social setting, in your operational setting and in your training setting. And those skills, those non-technical skills, are the things that will set you apart in a competitive recruitment process, applying to undergraduate programs of study or applying to an ambulance service through a sort of an apprenticeship route.
So this question's a bit more about like how you juggle your role with your life. So what's your work-life balance like when you're doing all those really long shifts and you're on call for so long?
Abysmal. So I am somebody who is rubbish at managing the work-life balance. So my partner's also sort of a consultant paramedic. We've got a child, we've got a dog. Fortunately, in my role or in our roles, we are senior leaders. We get paid 37.5 hours a week. We probably work 50, 60 plus hours a week. But we have the flexibility because ultimately our job is just to get the job done. So we can be flexible with our approach. It's a lot more difficult for shift workers. So emergency care support workers, technicians or AAPs and paramedics working frontline operational shifts can be a little bit more of a challenge in managing the work-life balance. I think the challenge I have is the inability to switch off. So I'm about to do something really random. So next week I'm on annual leave and I'm learning to become a swimming teacher. But that's something completely different from being a paramedic, and I can completely switch off from board papers and all this kind of stuff that I need to be writing, and I can still do something that's fun, swimming pool, and value add in teaching. So it's probably about finding other things that are important to you. Dog walks, great distraction for me, early morning, less so when it's raining, and in the evening.
So I know you just kind of touched on your salary. One of our cadets has asked, what kind of salary do paramedics get?
Awesome, good question. So I'm not going to tell you how much I earn, but if you go to NHS Employers website, all of the pay scales are on there. So it's called Agenda for Change. So if you just did a Google search for NHS Employers Agenda for Change, the pay scales are there. Paramedics will start off newly qualified on band 5. And then we'll move to band 6 as when they come out of preceptorship. And then if you go into specialties, then you'll probably be band 7 and then go into leadership, and then you go into band 8, which is then broken down. But NHS Employers will give you all of that information.
So one of our cadets has asked, are most of your call-outs about old people falling over and cut fingers? Because this is what they hear a lot about from people and it kind of puts them off.
Cool. So I think that's a really good question, and it's about being realistic. If you watch telly, Casualty and all that kind of stuff, I'm sure Casualty's still on. It's all doom, gloom, death and destruction and all this kind of stuff. Actually, the majority of our work is social care and primary care and lower acuity call volumes. I think what people seem to get a bit blasé about falls. So we need to remember that 1/5 of the 909 call volume is for fallers. So 1 in 5 ambulances are probably going to a fall. And people get put off by falls, but actually they're some of our more complex patients, because why did they have a fall? They could be frail. And if they're frail, what comorbidities do they have? How long have they been on the floor for? Is there a risk of a long lie and conditions such as rhabdomyolysis and stuff? And I think we can be really blasé at doing suggesting the low acuity stuff is not cool and Gucci. Actually, some of the sickest patients I see and some of the discussions that I've had in sort of our serious incident group today are about fallers, and they're fascinating patients, and patients that you can be really impactful upon, but you need to change that mindset. And when I teach people, when I talk to people and they start saying, so 111 call, so the NHS non-emergency number 111 that's come through to the ambulance service, yada yada yada, it's a waste of our time. Well, it's not, because we need to remember that at that moment in time, anyone who dials 909, anyone who dials 111 wants to or perceives that they need to access healthcare, and we've got an opportunity to support that individual, whether we think it's an emergency or not. To that individual, they need help. And I think if you have that mindset, you're not going to be dragged down. You're going to be that happy, smiley person that loves their job.
So I think this may have to be our last question. What is your standout moment as a paramedic?
There's so many moments to think about. Like, I think one of the nicest things that I've got to experience as a paramedic is, and it's not about the clinical stuff, one of the nicest things I've got to experience is being able to appoint somebody into a senior leadership position that was one of my students. So they were one of my students when I had first started teaching, and then they almost latched on and sort of saw me as a bit of a role model. And then it was such a proud moment being able to offer them a job in a fairly senior role, and sort of in a Band 8 role, and watch them take it and own it, and they're now starting that journey of developing other people, and you've got that knock-on effect. I think that's one of my warmest thoughts and feelings, I suppose.
So that we are coming to the end of our talk. So I want to say thank you to Ashley. Oh, can't get the words out now. Thank you to Ashley for such an amazing talk. I've learned so much, and I think all of our cadets have as well. So thank you. Also, thank you to our cadets for putting in so many questions. I think I got emailed the number. I think it was like over 30. So I'm sorry we could get around to them all. If you check the St. John Youth Development link tree, which is now, the link is now on the screen, we will put extra answers from Ashley up on that. So thank you for coming to this cadet talk in honour of the cadet centenary and 100 years of youth. The next talk is on Wednesday the 27th of April, where we'll be hearing from a student nurse who is currently in St. John as a volunteer with a very interesting career path in disaster medicine. So I'm hoping to see lots of you next month. So we will have a new guest speaker and a new cadet host. So thank you for coming, and thank you for sending in all your questions. We hope you've enjoyed tonight, and you are now free to leave.